Every Marcus Aurelius morning routine video starts the same way: cold shower, journaling, Stoic affirmations, gratitude practice, maybe some mention of waking at 4 a.m. because apparently the ancient Romans were also obsessed with 4 a.m. I've watched dozens of them, and almost none of them quote the meditations directly, which is strange, because the meditations exist. They're sitting there, free, online, in print, 2,000 years old, and completely available. And yet, the most popular takes on Marcus Aurelius's morning are built almost entirely on speculation, projection, and modern productivity culture, dressed up in a toga. So today we're going to do something different. We're going to open the actual book, read what he actually wrote, and find out that the real Marcus Aurelius is, I'd argue, far more useful than the mythologized one. Before we get into the text, you need to understand what the Meditations actually is, because most people don't. And it changes everything. This was not a book Marcus Aurelius wrote for you. He didn't write it for anyone. There's no evidence he ever intended it to be published. What you're reading when you open the Meditations is a private journal, closer to a training log than a philosophy text. Notes he wrote to himself, probably at night or in the early morning, during military campaigns on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. He was dealing with plague, 2 major wars, political instability, the death of children, and he's the most powerful man in the world, which comes with its own specific kind of loneliness. He wasn't writing from a position of mastery. He was writing from a position of struggle, reminding himself of principles he kept failing to live up to. That's why the tone is so urgent. Stop talking about what a good man should be. Be one. That's not a man who has it figured out. That's a man fighting with himself. Keep that in mind as we go through the text. This is not an instruction manual. It's a sparring partner's notes. Now, Book 5. Opening lines, Marcus writes, and I'm going to read this slowly because it deserves it. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for? Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm. Stop there for a second. This is the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, ruler of tens of millions of people. And he is at dawn, arguing with himself about getting out of bed. He continues, but it's nicer here. So you were born to feel nice instead of doing things and experiencing them? Don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants, and spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being. Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? This is not a productivity tip. This is a man having a full argument with himself, anticipating every excuse his brain will generate at 6 in the morning, and answering each one before it can take hold. What's remarkable is the structure of it. He doesn't just tell himself to get up. He reasons himself out of bed. He appeals to nature, to purpose, to the world around him that is already working while he lies there. The ants are working, the bees are working, the spider is working, and you, Emperor of Rome, you're going to stay in bed? That specificity, ants, birds, spiders, isn't decoration. It's a rhetorical move. He's making himself feel small in the best possible way, reminding himself that the universe doesn't stop for his comfort, and neither should he. Now compare that to the version of Marcus Aurelius you find online. The typical Stoic morning routine video will tell you he woke at a fixed hour, practiced negative visualization, wrote in his journal with intention, and approached each day from a place of calm philosophical clarity. And some of that might be true. He almost certainly did write in the mornings. But notice what gets left out in that version. The resistance, the argument, the fact that he found it hard. The internet version of Marcus Aurelius is already enlightened when he wakes up. He floats out of bed into his Stoic practice, serene and resolved. The actual Marcus Aurelius wakes up and immediately has to talk himself into being a functioning human being. He's cold. He wants to stay under the covers. He has to remind himself, in writing to himself in a private journal nobody was meant to read, why getting up matters. That's not a failure of Stoicism. That's what Stoicism actually looks like in practice. It's not the absence of resistance. It's the daily act of meeting resistance with reason. The productivity version is aspirational. The real version is actionable, because it starts exactly where you are. There's a Stoic concept underneath this passage that rarely gets named directly. It's called kathekon, loosely translated as appropriate action or duty. The Stoics believed every living thing has a nature, and living well means acting in accordance with that nature. For a bee, that means building honeycomb. For an ant, carrying food. For a human being, and specifically for Marcus, as emperor, it means engaging fully with the work of being human, reasoning, contributing, showing up. The Stoics weren't ascetics who hated comfort. They weren't telling you suffering is good. What they were saying is that comfort, pursued as an end in itself, is a slow way of abandoning your purpose. The warm bed isn't evil. It just isn't you. Not fully. Not the version of you that does the work you're capable of. Marcus puts it another way elsewhere in the Meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The morning is where that power gets tested first. Before anything else happens, before the world makes its demands, there's a moment where you choose the warmth or the work. Every single day, I want to bring this into the space most of us actually live in, which, if you're watching this channel, probably includes some version of early morning training. The argument Marcus has with himself at dawn is identical to the one you have at 5:45 a.m. when the alarm goes off and your gym bag is by the door. It's cold. The bed is warm. I trained yesterday. I'll go tomorrow. I'm tired. I deserve rest. These are real thoughts. They're not weakness. They're just your brain doing what brains do, seeking comfort, conserving energy. Marcus had them too. The Emperor of Rome had them. What he understood, and what he built his entire morning practice around, is that, hey, you can't wait for the feeling to change before you move. You reason your way into motion. You remind yourself what you're for, and then you go. This is why the Stoic approach to discipline is fundamentally different from the motivational approach. Motivation asks, how do I feel? Stoicism asks, what am I for? Seneca puts a sharper point on it in the letters. If you would not have a man flinch when the crisis comes, train him before it comes. The morning workout, the cold morning, the resistance you push through before 7 a.m. That's not just fitness, that's character training. Every time you win that argument with yourself, you get marginally better at winning it. The disposition builds. Marcus didn't have a perfect morning routine. He had a practice of arguing himself into action every single morning for the rest of his life. And he wrote it down so he could remember why. So here's what I'd actually take from the real Marcus Aurelius morning routine. Not a fixed wake time. Not a journaling template. Not 5 Stoic affirmations. This, the resistance you feel in the morning, is not a problem to be solved. It's the practice itself. The moment you have to choose between warmth and work, that's not an obstacle to your routine. That is the routine. Marcus Aurelius, 2,000 years ago, in a military tent on the Danube frontier, was having the exact same argument you're having tomorrow morning. And he wrote himself a reminder, not because he'd mastered it, but because he hadn't yet, and he knew he'd need the words again. Maybe you will too. The Meditations. Book 5. First page. Read it before you read anything else tomorrow morning. Not for inspiration. As a sparring partner. See you in the next one.